My name is Dawn, and I'm married to Carla. We've been together for 8.5 years and have 2 wonderful children, 8-year-old Steve and 4-year-old Lori. Carla was pregnant when we tied the knot, and Steve came into our lives 6 months later. Most of our friends and relatives didn't pay much attention to our unconventional beginnings, but Carla's parents were disappointed in their daughter. I want to make it clear that the blame lies solely with me. I was the one who pushed her into premarital intimacy. I was the one who impregnated her and ruined her chances for a better future. I didn't live up to their hopes of becoming the man they wanted for their daughter. They didn't think she'd have to settle for someone like me. How terrible they feel, and how terrible I feel, knowing that everything they say about me is true. I convinced her to be intimate with me and deprived her of her innocence. I take full responsibility for my actions. Nevertheless, it should be noted that young Carla willingly participated in all the activities we engaged in. She willingly participated, and I do not regret our actions at all. It was an amazing experience that we both enjoyed. In my opinion, her parents can criticize as much as they want, but I care about their daughter more than any man. They're fixated on her pregnancy, and nothing I do will change their minds. In their eyes, I will always be a villain until I die. Carla and I first met when she was in high school in Chicago Heights, and I was in my sophomore year of college at the University of Illinois at Champaign. From the moment we met, I realized that she was the one I needed. Our bond was undeniable, and we quickly became a couple. After a month of dating, I had the honor to be her first, and from that moment, our love life blossomed. After graduating from high school, Carla returned home to her parents and began working as a cashier at Chase Manhattan Bank. I often visited her on weekends, either in Chicago Heights or in Oak Lawn, where my parents lived. In my senior year of college, I found out that she was 2 months pregnant. We got married quickly and tied the knot in November. Our son, Steve, was born 6 months later in May. Shortly after his birth, I graduated from college and got a job at O'Hare Airport Security. Carla lived with her parents until I graduated from college and started working. After graduating, we set up our apartment and moved in. It was a joy to finally live together as one family. For the next 8 years, everything went smoothly. Our careers improved, we bought a house, and our son, Steve, flourished. Our marriage and intimate life were strong, and when our daughter Lori was born, our family continued to grow happily. We experienced more and more success, wealth, and joy. But now, I must tell you about the reason that prompted me to write this story. All this happiness had to be broken. There has been a lot of unhappiness in my life for several months. My wife and I were constantly arguing about which of us was preventing the other from getting enough sleep. I complained that her snoring prevented me from sleeping, and she made the same claim to me. Despite her denial, my wife snored without stopping, waking me up. I lay in bed listening to her squeak for an hour before falling asleep again. I realize that I can snore sometimes because I catch myself doing it from time to time. I understand that my partner may lose sleep because of this, but I don't like that she completely blames me for this. It bothers me that she doesn't think this could be a common problem. I already have enough criticism from her parents, so I don't think it's fair to get it from her too. Trying to solve this problem, I brought a voice recorder from work and put it on the bedside table by our bed. I jokingly told Carla that we would find out the truth about who snores and who doesn't. The next morning, we woke up at the same time and kissed, then rewound the tape to listen. To our delight, my chainsaw-like snoring was clearly audible, which made her jokingly point at me and complain that she found it hard to bear. Soon, in the pauses between my chainsaw-like sounds, I could clearly hear her squeaking, snoring. Carla sighed in disbelief and gave me a shocked look, which made me burst out laughing. "Oh my God, I'm terrible," she exclaimed. At that moment, we both couldn't help but laugh. She jokingly said, "Honey, we really need to work on this so we don't end up kicking each other out of the bedroom." I wholeheartedly agreed with her. Yes, this creaking definitely needs attention. I felt relieved that I wasn't the only one taking the blame this time. She playfully slapped my hand and apologized for putting all the blame on me. I calmed her down by pulling her close, kissing her warmly, and giving her a loving hug, with maybe some gentle touches. She didn't seem to mind at all. After we finished, both children woke up, and as a result, we were late for work. As expected, the recorder was forgotten. A few days later, she asked me to come home early to look after the kids because she had a meeting at the bank. Then I noticed the dictaphone. A mischievous grin appeared on my face as I recalled my evidence that she snores. Unable to resist the temptation to listen to the recording again, I rewound the tape and turned it on. After listening to our recording, the next morning, I found that the sounds of our intimacy turned me on. I was shocked by what I heard next. My wife was unfaithful to me and had been with another man in our marital bed. There was nothing more to add. After learning about the cheating on the tape, I quickly called our neighbor Judy and asked if she could look after the children while I focused on work. Fortunately, she was free and agreed to help. I walked the kids to Judy's house, reminding them to be good and promising to pick them up as soon as dinner was ready. Judy was delighted with the guests, and her 2 children, of the same age, enjoyed playing with them. I went upstairs to the bedroom and continued listening to the tape. "Steve, it's been too long since we last made love," the voice on the tape said. "I've missed you so much these past few months. But don't worry, I'm going to catch up this afternoon. Let's make some unforgettable memories together. I can't wait for you to get me pregnant again today. Dawn and I are thinking about having another child, and I think I'm at the peak of my fertility right now. I hope that all 3 of my children will have the same father. Has Don never thought about this situation? Has he never wondered why our children don't look like him at all? Is he stupid? Let's not talk bad about Don. He's not stupid. I never gave him any reason to doubt my loyalty. I've never denied him intimacy. He even got close to me after you, but he just thought I was getting too excited by him. Did you really let him get the leftovers after me? Oh my God, yes. He did it once, and I was so worried that he would notice something was wrong. But he didn't. I admit it was funny to think about. I still can't believe that you managed to trick him with the kids. Fortunately, Steve Jr. and Lori look like me, so he has no reason to be suspicious. I heard her laughing at a joke about Steve Jr., and it just made me sick. Maybe tonight I will make you a child like me and reveal your secret. Then Don will divorce you, and you can marry me. Steve, please stop discussing this. Don is very dear to me, and I don't want to hurt him. Our relationship is purely physical, and I like it, but that's where our connection ends. Now, please be quiet and be with me intensely and quickly so that I can get pregnant. I want to expect your 3rd child before you leave today." The rest of the tape contained the expected sounds of passion between a man and a woman, including expressions of pleasure. I listened to everything. I heard every detail of what Steve was doing with Carla that day. I heard how she enjoyed his closeness, something I had never heard in all the years of our life together. I realized that I had never made her as happy as he did. My whole marriage was a facade. The love, trust, and intimacy that I thought we shared were fiction. There was no love or loyalty on her part. How could she claim to love me and still commit such a betrayal? It was impossible. How could she say that she gave all of herself to our marriage when she was hiding such deception? She claimed that she had never denied me intimacy, but that was also a lie since she allowed him to treat her in a way that she had never allowed me to. The words on this tape deeply wounded me, leaving behind fragments. I felt deep pain inside me, physically and emotionally. My heart was racing, praying that it would keep beating. I felt sick. I felt deprived of my manhood. I was filled with fear and anger. It seemed like I couldn't go on. I was overwhelmed with many emotions, including devastation. It was the perfect time to leave. I was so afraid of what I was going to do. I needed to figure out what to do next. How would this situation affect my family and my future? First of all, I needed to make sure that I had a copy of the recording that I could hold on to. I was sure that one way or another, I would need it. The recorder was a 2-cassette recorder, and I decided to copy it from the first cassette to the second. I carefully put the copy in a manila envelope and discreetly placed it in the trunk of my car. Whatever happened next, I knew I had this tape as proof. Besides, I realized how important it was to keep my knowledge a secret. Rewinding the tape to the end of the snoring demonstration, I erased the rest of the recording. Then I put the recorder back on the bedside table and quietly left the bedroom. If Carla thought about it, she would be puzzled, but after listening to the recording, she wouldn't hear anything that could lead her to believe that I knew her secret. Realizing that I needed all the information before deciding what to do next, I decided to start from the beginning. From the moment I first met Carla, I was introduced to her through her school friend, who was dating my cousin. Knowing that her school albums could provide valuable information, I decided to start my investigation with them. I searched the entire basement until I finally found the box that held our school albums. Carefully putting both yearbooks in the trunk of my car, I tried to return the box to its original place to avoid arousing suspicion. If she noticed it was missing, I could always say they were in another box. Realizing that Carla would sense something was wrong if I saw her that evening, I turned to my loyal friend and boss, Jim, for help. Over the years of working together, we had developed a strong, trusting relationship, and I knew that he would support me in difficult times. I informed him of my findings and asked him to cover for me, while I studied the situation more deeply and eventually made a decision. I suggested that he arrange for me to take a short trip to New York to participate in an anti-terrorism training program. This was consistent with my previous courses and would not arouse suspicion. Although I wasn't going to attend classes, I had other things to do and secrets to uncover. Jim agreed to support my alibi and stated that the classes had arisen suddenly and I needed to attend them. There was only 1 hour left before boarding the plane. I quickly dialed Carla's number and explained that Jim had sent me on an urgent business trip. I informed her that I would leave the children with Judy for the day, and in a few minutes I would pack my things and go to the airport. I admitted that I didn't know all the details of the trip yet, but promised to let her know as soon as I found out everything. Carla was unhappy with the sudden departure, but I assured her that nothing could be done and said goodbye to her. I heard her say, "I love you, Don," but when I ended the conversation, she didn't hear anything in response. I went to Judy's house to explain that I needed to leave town urgently. I told her that Carla would be home in about an hour to pick up the kids, and she agreed. I asked if I could take Steve and Lori with me while I packed up to say goodbye to them, and she agreed too, so we set off. Recently, I'd been following the news about a prisoner in Wisconsin. After spending almost 2 decades behind bars for crimes he didn't commit, Stephen Avery had finally been released thanks to the efforts of a group of Benjamin N. Cardozo's School of Law students working with the Innocence Project. DNA analysis definitively proved Avery's innocence of first-degree sexual assault, attempted murder, and false imprisonment. The real criminal, who had already served time for another crime, was identified as the perpetrator of these heinous acts. Avery's unjust conviction was finally corrected, and justice prevailed. However, he was now linked to the recent Teresa Halbach murder case, and DNA evidence pointed to his involvement. He had been charged with first-degree premeditated murder. This tragic situation for her and her loved ones reminded me to collect DNA samples from my children before leaving. When I got home, I carefully took saliva samples from Steve and Lori using swabs. I was determined to analyze their DNA and compare it with mine to confirm whether I was their biological father. The results of these tests would not be favorable for me. I already knew what Carla had told me on the tape. Hastily gathering clothes for a few days, I left the house with the children. I took them to Judy's and thanked her for looking after them at the last minute. After checking into a hotel in Harvey, a suburb on the south side of Chicago, I chose a place away from Chicago Heights to avoid running into Carla's family. It was a convenient center for my investigation. Arriving at the hotel, I decided to grab some beer and get drunk. At the time, it seemed like the most reasonable option. Why endure pain and mental anguish while remaining conscious? Why try to fall asleep all night replaying hurtful memories in my head? It was easier to just drink until I passed out. I knew that I would wake up the next day feeling terrible, but it was inevitable, so I decided to get drunk. When I finally woke up, I felt terrible. It was already 11 o'clock in the morning, and I was afraid that I wouldn't live to see noon. Feeling a headache and nausea, I decided to drink a few more bottles of beer. Surprisingly, it turned out to be a good choice, because when I woke up at 3 p.m., I felt a little better. I called the cleaning service and asked for coffee and toast, which were delivered very quickly. While I was waiting, I took a shower and changed into fresh clothes. The coffee was exactly what I needed, and I was able to eat the toast without any problems. Thinking about what to do with the rest of the day, I decided to check the messages on my mobile phone. To my surprise, 3 people were waiting for me. The first message was from Carla, expressing her disappointment that I hadn't been able to get a call from her upon arrival. The second message, also from Carla, was more stern. She was angry that I hadn't called her either the night before or that morning. She seemed annoyed, but it didn't bother me. I planned to come up with a good excuse when I eventually talked to her. Shortly after Carla's call, Jim called me. He said she was furious and demanded to know my whereabouts and current situation. He informed me that I owed him for dealing with all the trouble she had caused him, and I agreed. He explained to her that he had no more information about my whereabouts than she did, since he did not know which hotel I would be staying at. He mentioned that the seminar would be held at the Kennedy Airport Convention Center and suggested she try to contact me there. Knowing about the strict security measures at airports, he doubted that she would be able to find me even if I was there. I felt calm knowing that I wasn't really at the airport and decided to wait before calling her. According to my calculations, before Carla returned from work, I had a few hours that I could devote to the project. So I settled down at my laptop and started working with the checklist. I wrote down all the information I already had and noted all the missing details that needed to be filled in. I scrupulously combed through my wife's yearbooks, listing everyone who left a message and sorting them by year of study. I contacted her school and asked if they had a graduation album from 5 years ago. The assistant administrator kindly informed me that they did. I also eagerly asked for a copy of the list of participants for the upcoming 10-year reunion. She informed me that it could be sent electronically, so I gave her my email address and asked her to send it. 5 minutes later, I received the list and began collecting names from the yearbook along with names, spouses, addresses, and phone numbers. It was a real treasure trove of information because now I had the most recent list. I even had information about her classmates' children, pets, hobbies, favorite dishes, and much more. It was a veritable storehouse of information. I found that Carla had provided updated information about us, including our 2 children and our hope for a third. I knew that Carla would be back from work soon, so I plucked up the courage to call her and face her possible anger. At some point, I needed to confront the situation. Have you noticed that I've become more cynical? That's because I didn't care about her emotions anymore. It's her fault that I feel this way, and I wasn't going to hide my sarcasm. She would just have to put up with it. I dialed her number and she answered without holding back. "Dawn, where have you been? Why didn't you call me back last night or this morning? What's going on?" I wasn't surprised by her tirade, so I let her talk before answering. I explained that I had returned home very late and did not want to wake the children with calls. I admitted that I had been drinking a little, so I didn't call in the morning. I needed to prepare quickly for the days ahead and just didn't have time. I stayed at the Hilton Garden Hotel at JFK Airport last night, but I was only able to book a room for 1 night, and now I had to look for another hotel for the following nights. Therefore, she should call me on my mobile phone, but it wouldn't be turned on during class. I felt that this way I could distance myself as much as possible. I realized that I needed to remain anonymous during the calls I was planning to make, so I decided to buy a disposable mobile phone. I went to the store next to the hotel and bought a track phone that was affordable and guaranteed that calls from it would be impossible to track. It was the perfect solution. After buying the phone, it was already about 6 o'clock in the evening, and I felt hungry. Returning to the hotel, I noticed George's Rib House and decided to stop by for a snack. Back in the room, I started collecting information. I carefully looked through Carla's graduation album, noting each person who left a comment. I classified each comment using a code system, and enemies for negative comments. Having compiled a list of 40 names, which included 30 females and 10 males, I ordered it by gender code, and then by the code of specific relationships. There were 5 boyfriends, 4 friends, and 1 non-friend in the male category. Steve Wilson was one of the boyfriends on the list. I suspected that he was the man in question, but I needed concrete evidence before making any final decisions. I was sure I would find it. It seemed to me that Gil Roberts, a man who could not be called a friend, might provide valuable information, perhaps because Carla had refused him, or because of his dislike of Steve. Among the acquaintances, there were 3 close friends, about 25 friends, and 2 acquaintances who were not friends. All 3 close friends were bridesmaids at my wedding, so I knew I had to be careful when contacting them for information. I assumed that a few friends would be able to share information, and with those who were not friends, I planned to behave more aggressively. It turned out that people are more willing to share gossip about those they don't like. I collected data from the alumni meeting booklet, contact information, names of spouses and children, hobbies, interests, professions, and places of work. Not everyone provided the same information, but the amount of information gathered was staggering. I believed that all this information would help me uncover the truth about Carla and her lover. When I finished collecting information, it was already 10 o'clock in the evening, and I was ready to call it a night. I planned to start work early the next morning, hoping to complete the investigation by the end of the day. I was getting ready to get a good night's sleep, and went to bed when suddenly I was interrupted by the ringing of my mobile phone. I looked at my watch and noticed that it was only 10:30 p.m. Knowing that the children were already asleep and she had finished watching the evening news, I picked up the phone and waited for her to say something. "Hi, Dawn. I thought you'd call me tonight as soon as you got settled in," she said. "I was thinking about it, but after I called last time, and you yelled, I decided to wait and see if you wanted to talk to me," I replied. "I'm sorry I was rude to you," she apologized. "I was upset because I couldn't get through to you during the strange trip and felt insecure. Can you forgive me?" The idea of forgiving her seemed unusual to me. I doubted that forgiveness would come easily and soon, but I didn't want to reveal my true feelings yet. I replied, "I am sure that everything will pass in a few days. Don't worry." She objected. "It doesn't feel like forgiveness, dear. I have to admit I'm a little upset with the way you've treated me." There was a silence before she spoke again. I wasn't sure if she suspected that I knew anything, but at that moment I didn't care. Whether she thought about how her actions had affected our marriage was unclear, but I hope so. In the end, she said, "I suppose I should leave you, Dawn. I'm really sorry. I love you." I replied, "I'm sorry too. Good night, Carla." When she put the phone back on the stand, I heard her start crying. It was a restless night, but I managed to get some rest. Fortunately, I didn't have to put up with her loud snoring. The memory of how she realized how bad her snoring was still makes me smile, but also makes me sad. We shared a special moment, laughed at it, and then came a morning filled with love and affection. The memories of what we had lost and what we might never experience broke my heart again, and I eventually fell asleep. The next day, I started working on my to-do list. I decided to investigate my wife and myself by posing as Roger Moore from the National Security Service. Using the phone, I contacted several of my wife's friends and informed them that I was conducting a background check on Don Phillips, who was being considered for a job in the Chicago area anti-terrorism group. I mentioned that Mr. Phillips was married to Carla Peterson, their former classmate. I asked a lot of questions about her school connections and eventually found out that Steve Wilson was her high school boyfriend. They were together for 3 years, but after graduating from high school, she broke off the relationship. I found out that Steve still lives in Chicago Heights and works as a loan officer at Chase Manhattan Bank. He is recently divorced and has 2 sons. I confirmed his presence at the reunion through the event booklet. He was undeniably attractive, a man who could easily attract a woman's attention. I couldn't help but envy his looks, yet despite his attractiveness, she decided to break up with him and devote herself to me. It was the first time she gave herself to me, and not to him, yet she continued to maintain a relationship with him over the years, even allowing him to become the father of our children. Why did she do that? These questions haunted me, and I couldn't find the answers to them. Perhaps she holds the key to unraveling the truth, but for now, I remain in the dark. After Carla broke off her relationship with Steve shortly after we met, she continued to work with him at the bank until they were transferred to different departments. Despite this, they were still in close proximity to each other every day. I could understand how the connection had developed between them, but I was still not sure of its causes. Feeling that I had gathered enough information from our mutual friends, I decided to ask for more information from Jill Johnson, a woman who was not friends with Carla. I repeated the same background check information to her and then asked her bluntly if she had any important information about Carla Peterson, who was married to Don Phillips, that could affect his suitability to work in the National Security Service. As soon as the words left my mouth, she hurled a barrage of criticism at me. She angrily informed me that Carla was infamous as the most conniving person who had ever graduated from Chicago Heights High School. She accused Carla of being a homewrecker, a liar, and a criminal. I asked her to explain what her accusations were based on. In her sophomore year of college, she confessed to me about her past relationship with Steve Wilson, saying that Carla stole him from her. Although she admitted that stealing a boyfriend is not illegal, she thought it said a lot about Carla's character. This character flaw became even more apparent after Carla started dating her current husband. Rumors, mostly spread by Steve, said that Carla had resumed a relationship with him after she started working at the bank. Steve even boasted that he got her pregnant and continued to have intimate relationships with her, which led to 2 pregnancies. He had already started spreading the word that he impregnated her again this week. This was the latest information Jill confessed to me. She said she doesn't trust Don Phillips with any matters related to national security because she can't trust his unfaithful wife. I didn't expect it to be so simple. It also hurt me to find out that all this time others knew about the situation, and I remained in the dark. Deciding to find out the details from 2 other acquaintances, I contacted another woman and heard a similar story. She turned out to be the sister of Steve's ex-wife. There were rumors that his sister divorced Steve after she heard about the rumors that had reached her. Steve boasted that he had 2 more children and thought that his wife would never leave him, but he was wrong. Jill willingly gave me her sister's phone number, which I plan to use later. One of the classmates had feelings for Carla throughout school, but she never reciprocated. According to him, Carla claimed to be in love with Steve, but doubted she would marry him because of his arrogance. Steve allegedly tried to woo Carla for 3 years, but Carla insisted that she would only lose her innocence with her future husband. However, having lost her innocence, she might have thought about having an intimate relationship with Steve to remember the good old days. A classmate was offended by Carla's attitude because he hoped to become her future husband and was afraid that she would never be faithful to him. He believed that she would most likely allow Steve to enter into a relationship with her if he insisted. He mentioned that after this incident, he refused Carla's invitation to a date. Her behavior continued to hurt me even more than I had already experienced. It became clear to me that Carla had never intended to be faithful to me in any capacity, planning to betray me even before we met. Can you imagine how disgusted I felt? I had almost everything I needed from the list of names. Now I needed more information about Steve, and I decided to visit the bank to see him firsthand. I didn't want to reveal my identity to him, but I was curious to see him in person. He was just as attractive in person as he was in photographs. He was taller than me and obviously played sports. It was a pity that he was ill-mannered. Otherwise, he could have been a great catch. I had a few more things to do before heading home, but I knew I'd be back at my desk before nightfall. After completing all the tasks, I checked into the Candlewood Suites extended stay hotel located near the airport. I called Carla around 8:30 p.m. to let her know that I would be home by noon the next day. I asked her to take the day off so we could spend time together. By this point, I had already come to terms with my circumstances and showed no signs of what was really happening. I decided that since she had been deceiving me for years, a few wrong words on my part wouldn't do much harm. I assured her of my love and promised that everything would be fine. I slept peacefully that night. The next morning, I met with Jim in my office and told him about all the information I had gathered. Mr. Phillips handed me an envelope with the results of the DNA analysis obtained at the laboratory, where I had deposited the samples the day before. Although it was a bit more expensive, I was grateful for the overnight delivery option. I wanted to have the results on hand before I met Carla. I decided to open the envelope in Jim's presence, since he was not only my friend but also my boss, and I might need to ask him for a favor in the future. Dear Mr. Phillips, we have completed testing of the 5 samples that you provided on November 15th. Sample 1 and Sample 2 are full siblings. Samples 3 and 4 are also full siblings, with Sample 3 being male and Sample 4 being female. Samples 1 and 2 are stepbrothers to Samples 3 and 4, who are brother and sister. Our results show that all 4 samples have the same father, but Samples 1 and 2 have a different mother than Samples 3 and 4. It was confirmed that Sample 5, identified as male, is not related to any of the other samples presented. Since Mr. Phillips is related to Sample 5, there is no DNA evidence linking him to the biological father of Samples 1 and 2. If additional assistance is required, please contact us. Best regards, David Rafferty, PhD Accurate DNA Labs, Incorporated. I contacted Steve's ex-wife to ask for a meeting to discuss this issue. She agreed to meet with me and allowed me to take saliva swabs from her 2 children. In my briefcase was a signed statement confirming that she had voluntarily provided DNA samples of her children. Before leaving, Jim hugged me warmly and apologized for the difficult situation I found myself in. He assured me that he would support me and help me in every possible way. He also joked that he needed to be careful as I could deprive him of his job. He chuckled, surprised at how thorough an investigation had been conducted in such a short time. I couldn't help laughing too, even though I didn't feel particularly happy in my current situation. Armed with taped statements from Carla's classmates, a letter from Steve's ex-wife, a certified letter from the DNA lab, and a heavy heart, I went home to meet my wife. Arriving a few minutes before noon, I took a beer from the fridge and settled into the family room, waiting for Carla to return. I heard her coming from the garage a few minutes before noon. She rushed over to hug and kiss me, but I awkwardly dodged her. There was a puzzled expression on her face, but I knew it was going to get worse soon, so I ignored it. She asked me what was bothering me, and I waved her off by offering her a beer. She refused and made me tell her what was on my mind. "Carla, I know about your affair," I finally admitted. She started to protest, but I raised my hand to silence her. "I don't want to hear about it right now. I know about your infidelity, and I have proof. With such knowledge, why would I believe anything you say? Stop lying to me and pretending it didn't happen. Sit on the couch and listen to what I'm going to tell you. There is no need to talk, cry, deny, or apologize. Just listen." Her face turned pale, and her eyes filled with fear as she sat in silence. I offered her beer or water again, and she preferred a glass of water. After bringing her a glass, I pulled up a chair and sat down opposite her, trying to maintain eye contact while I prepared to share my thoughts. "Carla, I know about your affair. I have strong evidence to support this claim. I want you to understand that I am being honest with you, and in the future, I expect your actions to reflect this knowledge. Accept it, and it will benefit you in the long run. If you doubt my honesty, mistakes will definitely follow, and the consequences will not please you. I will leave this house today and pack everything I may need over the next month as I prepare to move out. Yes, I mentioned a month. During that time, we will remain married, but I will not be in this house." She choked on my words, whimpering but holding back tears and refraining from words. "Over the next month, you will have to solve two important tasks. The first is to determine your feelings for me and decide if you still want to be my wife. Regardless of my own decision, it is very important that you make this choice. If you don't love me or don't want to be my wife anymore, my wishes don't matter. Therefore, the decision is in your hands. I don't expect you to make that decision today. I want you to take the time to think about the details of your betrayal of our marriage. The Carla I once knew and loved is no longer the one I see in front of me now. It is important for me to understand the true background of your actions in order to move on. I need you to fully disclose to me all the details of your affair or affairs. I want to know the names of all the participants, why it happened, when it started, how often it happened, where it happened, and what actions were taken. Please don't miss anything, Carla. I want to find out the true identity of the woman I married. The woman I thought you were seems to have disappeared, and in order for our marriage to have a chance, I need to know who you really are. Carla, remember that I have proof of what you're hiding. It is very important that you be completely honest and not try to deceive me. If I find out that you lied, it will be the end for us. However, if you're honest and tell me every detail, we have a chance to save our relationship. I'm only offering a chance, not a guarantee, so please don't misinterpret my words." I could see the fear growing in her eyes as she realized the gravity of the situation. "If you can't or won't tell me the truth, just let me know by the end of the month, and we can end our marriage quickly and without unnecessary pain. For the next month, the choice is yours. When you decide that you love me and our marriage, you can write to me at my work address with your confession attached. If I find out that you are continuing your affair in the future, our marriage will be terminated immediately. As for the kids, do you want to pick them up next month, or should I? Any option will suit me. If you decide to pick them up, I'll visit them every Wednesday night. I'll pick them up from the babysitter and bring them back by 8:30 p.m. I'll call you when I get there so you can go out and get them. It's important that you understand these arrangements. I will pick up the children on one of the weekends every week as we agreed. You can choose a schedule that is convenient for you, and I will stick to it. If you don't want to pick them up, I'll offer you the same schedule. You can pick them up from the babysitter on Wednesdays, and I'll pick them up at 8:30 p.m. You can pick them up on one of the weekends, and I will bring them to you on the chosen day. I'll pack my things now and leave as soon as I'm done. Please make a decision about the children." I went up to the bedroom to pack my things. While I was packing, I heard her crying downstairs, but by the time I got back, she had managed to recover a little. Her eyes were still red, and her makeup was smudged, but she seemed to have pulled herself together. "Dawn," she began, "I know you don't want to listen to me. Stop it. You're right, I don't want to listen. Do as I say, or we can end this sham marriage right now." I thought I handled the situation well, but it became clear that I overestimated her understanding. Her ignorance of the seriousness of the situation made me so angry that I couldn't help myself. My words confused her, and she staggered back in shock. "Do you want to keep the kids with you, or should I take them?" I asked. Tears filled her eyes, and she prayed, "I want them to be with me." With a heavy heart, I decided to leave. I promised to call her the next day to discuss the schedule for picking up the children on Wednesdays and weekends. "Goodbye, Carla," I said, leaving. The month passed quickly. Every Wednesday night, I invited Steve and Lori to dinner and then returned to my room. Although Lori was very young and did not understand what was going on, Steve guessed that something was wrong. He asked why I was not at home. I explained that his mother and I had difficulties in our marriage and needed to be apart to sort out the situation. I assured him that we both deeply loved him and Lori, and asked him to be patient and not worry about us. Steve seemed pleased with my answers, and I decided to leave it as it was for now. Every time I drove the kids to the house, I saw Carla. She met them at the front door and made sure they entered the house quietly. One day, she came to the car to talk to me, but I just raised my hand to stop her and drove away. As I drove away, I saw her tear-stained face in the rearview mirror. She'd been standing in the doorway ever since. Exactly 1 month after our meeting, I received a letter from Carla. It said, "I want to apologize for the pain you've been through. I love you and really want to become your wife. Please call me as soon as you read my letter and decide to return to my house. I'm ready to spend the rest of my life with you because both I and your children need you." Reading Carla's words, I felt that there was more to this story than she was saying. I knew that Steve and Lori were not biologically mine, and I had a premonition of what the outcome of my decision would be even before I opened her letter. A long letter was attached in which she expressed her desire. "I want you to come home. I love you and I want to grow old with you, but at the same time, I'm in a difficult situation. I love 2 men, you and another man named Steve Wilson. I understand that this revelation will hurt you, but I felt it necessary to be extremely honest with you about my feelings. You accused me of having an affair, and maybe from a technical point of view, it's true, but I never thought so. When most people think of an affair, they imagine a short-term relationship with someone outside the relationship, but my connection with Steve came before my relationship with you. You already know that at the time we met, I had another man, Steve Wilson. Steve was a handsome, charming, witty, intelligent, and caring man. Despite all these qualities, he still had one significant drawback that did not allow me to marry him. No matter how much I loved him, I knew that his arrogance and charm would not allow him to remain a faithful husband. Therefore, although I was in love with him, I made the difficult decision not to give him my innocence as I was determined to keep it for my future husband. He made countless attempts to convince me to give in, and part of me was tempted, but I stood my ground. Then I met you. It wasn't long before I realized that I had fallen in love with you, and that you were the person I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. You had all the qualities I wanted in a husband. You were attractive, kind, gentle, smart, funny, and incredibly handsome. I could imagine a future with you in which you would be faithful to me. I deeply adored you for embodying everything I was looking for in a partner. The thing is, my love for Steve has never waned. I care for both of you in unique but identical ways. It's hard to express, but it's the closest I can come to describing my feelings. Steve stubbornly continued to pursue a romantic relationship with me, despite my constant refusals. I spent weekends with you, and met Steve during the week. He knew about my feelings for you, but he also felt that my love for him was still strong. I once told him that maybe after I gave my innocence to my future husband, I would consider letting him have an intimate relationship with me before I tied the knot. He looked at me strangely but didn't bring it up again. When I gave myself to you, he felt that something had changed. He began to put pressure on me, wanting the opportunity to have an intimate relationship with me, as I had suggested, even though we weren't married or engaged yet. I knew you were the one I wanted to spend my whole life with. In the end, I gave in to Steve's advances. To tell the truth, I wanted him to make love to me. I loved him as much as I loved you. I gave myself to him and found pleasure in our closeness. I got pregnant, knowing that Steve was the father, not you, but I wanted you to be my husband, not him. I am deeply sorry for the pain I caused you. From that moment on, I was unfaithful to you. I told you that we were expecting a baby, and you married me, never doubting that the baby was yours because you were the first one to be with me. Little Steve looked like me, and you didn't have any doubts. Even in your absence, I haven't stopped seeing Steve. We continued to meet every month or so. My relationship with him persisted even after we got married. I cherished both you and Steve. You've been a wonderful father to Steve and Lori, and I couldn't ask for a better husband. Every day, my love for you grew deeper. Although it may not bring you any comfort, my feelings for Steve have not changed, but my love for you has only grown stronger over time. For a couple of years, I have been watching you closely, secretly hoping that you would betray me so that I could justify my actions. But you never did that. You were the perfect husband, everything a woman could ask for. And I knew I was lucky to have you, even if I didn't consider myself worthy. But I can't stall any longer. I have to tell you everything you asked for. I will do my best to give you answers. Who is Steve Wilson? Why do I love him? We met in different places, including his house, various hotels, and motels. Our meetings took place in restaurants, parks, and sometimes in his or my car. We always found a way to meet where it was convenient for us. The exact dates and times have disappeared from my memory, but we managed to see each other once a month or once every 2 months. Our meetings were filled with intimacy, playfulness, conversations, kisses, and hugs. He introduced me to previously unfamiliar sensations. It was nice to know that he loved me too. I justify my actions by saying that I am your wife, I live with you, and he spends only short moments with me. Steve eventually got married, but the marriage proved short-lived due to his infidelity. He cheated on his wife with me and other women. When his wife found out the truth, she divorced him. Steve asked me to divorce you and marry him, but I made it clear to him that I would never leave you. I told him that I knew he would be unfaithful to me. Ironically, the quality I expected from my husband was much higher than what I demonstrated as a wife. I apologize for that, Don. I know you've had enough, but there are 2 more things I need to share with you. Steve is also Lori's father, and I'm pregnant again. I strongly suspect that this happened the last time I was with Steve. This means that all 3 of our children are Steve's biological children. I thought it would be perfect if they were brothers and sisters so that they would never have doubts. Nevertheless, Don, you will always be their father. You love and cherish them. And Steve has never met them in all this time. He doesn't want to be their father, and I don't want him to be either. I want you to be their father. I am deeply sorry for the pain you went through. If I could fix it, I would. Please know that I am praying for you to come home. I hope that you will give us the opportunity to solve our problems and save our marriage. I hope that your love for me is strong enough to wish the same. Please think about coming back to my house. I understand that you have many unanswered questions on your mind, and I am ready to answer each of them. Please give me a chance to fix this. I'm looking forward to your call. With love, Carla. The next day, Friday, I contacted Carla and informed her that I would be back home early in the morning. I suggested that she take the day off and leave the children with the babysitter, as we needed to have a serious conversation. She promised to do as I said and asked me what I thought. I replied that she would have to wait until the next day to find out everything. That was the end of the conversation. The next day, when I entered the house, I found Carla in the kitchen with a cup of coffee ready. I invited her to sit down at the table and discuss some important issues. Opening my briefcase and putting an impressive stack of papers and files on the table, I said to Carla, "This is my proof. It all started with this audio recording. It gave me valuable information. You cheated on me with a man named Steve, whom you liked to be with. This infidelity continued even before we got married, as a result of which neither of my 2 children was biologically mine. You even planned to have another child with him, expecting me to raise him with you. After intimacy with him, you came to me as if nothing had happened, claiming that you loved me." The shock and disbelief on her face were obvious. And if you're wondering where the evidence came from, it came from the audio recording we used to determine who was snoring. I erased everything except the snoring so that you wouldn't realize that I found you. Instead of going to New York, I went to Chicago Heights to investigate your past, find information about Steve, and learn more about my children. That's why you couldn't find me in New York. After learning the truth about you, I decided that I didn't want to see you or talk to you anymore. I knew I had to leave before you got home. I took your school yearbook as a starting point for my research. I compiled a list of people who left comments in your yearbook and sorted them by the degree of connection with you. I carefully studied your yearbook and compared my findings with the graduate booklet provided to me by the school administration. This booklet contains the names, addresses, and phone numbers of the participants of the upcoming alumni meeting. Jill provided me with valuable information that greatly expanded my contact list. Johnson Marker and even Steve's wife's sister from your class, they all knew about your betrayal. Your friends and acquaintances know about your actions and what kind of person you really are, Carla. No wonder Steve couldn't keep quiet about it, especially since he had an innocent queen. The next piece of evidence was a folder with a letter from the DNA lab. This letter confirms that I am not the biological father of our 2 children. After talking to Steve's ex-wife, she agreed to meet with me and allowed me to take DNA samples from her 2 children and Steve. This letter confirms that Steve and Lori are the half-siblings of Steve Wilson's children. Mrs. Wilson also provided a letter stating that she had given permission to take DNA samples from her 2 sons. Opening my briefcase, I took out the last folder. I closed the briefcase and put it on the floor next to the table. Carla, this is all the evidence I have at the moment. If desired, I can find others. For example, receipts from the hotel, stains on clothes, unfamiliar objects, or hidden toys. If I really make an effort, I can find many more clues and potential witnesses. But do I really need to do all this to prove the extent of your affair? Carla shook her head in response. I am not one of those who is pleased to hear that my wife is in an intimate relationship with another man, and I have no desire to seek additional information on this issue. Your letter confirmed all the facts that I have already gathered, and I appreciate your honesty for once in my life. Thank you for having the courage to stop lying to me, Carla. I love you with all my soul and gave my all to our marriage. I believe that you were doing the same, and I was happy with our life together. Realizing the inadequacy of our marriage, I couldn't help but come to the conclusion that it was built on a lie and all our relationships were fiction. The betrayal I felt was so strong that at first I harbored thoughts of cruelty towards you and even Steve. Although I no longer want to act on these impulses, I will not hesitate to do so if pushed. Throughout this revelation, I watched Carla's expression change from surprise to fear as she realized the coming turmoil in her marriage. Her reaction intensified when I confessed to wanting to harm her. With a heavy heart, I reluctantly opened the last folder on the table. Here are the divorce papers that were filled out and signed by me. All that remains is for you to sign them too. In addition, I will file a lawsuit against you and your partner for paternity fraud. I asked that you both legally assume the role of parents for the children. As I spoke, her expression changed from fear to panic. At that moment, it seemed to me that there was a hint of madness in her eyes. Even though she ruined our marriage, when I saw that look, I was deeply saddened. It wasn't what I was hoping for, but I felt like I had no other choice. I can't live in the situation you created anymore. As soon as you sign the papers, please let me know. I expect you to move your things to the spare bedroom immediately, as I will be using the master bedroom. I expect you and the kids to leave within the next 2 months. If you refuse to accept my terms, I will have no choice but to make public all the evidence I have collected to everyone you know. You need this job to provide for the children and take care of them, right? I understand that you're upset with me, but why involve the children? They love you. You are the father of these children. Your love for them is undeniable. Why are you putting them through this? Carla said, trying to wipe away her tears. You're the one who created this situation for them, so don't try to put the blame on me. I'm not their father. Your lover is their father now. It doesn't matter what you want. You've already got what you wanted. Now it's my turn. I know that what I'm going to do will hurt them, but it will be temporary. Eventually, they'll come to terms with the truth and move on. If I leave them with me, it will only be a constant reminder of your betrayal and make me resent their presence in my life. I refuse to become an embittered person. One day, the children will ask why their father left and why another man is impersonating their father. I know that at first you will try to deceive them and make me look like a bad guy. But in the end, the truth will prevail over your lies. They say that the husband is often the last to know about it, but in your case, the children are the last to know about it. It may not happen today or tomorrow, but one day, they will find out the truth. I'm saying goodbye to you, Carla. We will meet again in court. And with that, I left. Carla tried to stop me by running up to me, but I had already closed the door in her face. When I returned the next day, I noticed that she had removed her things from the bedroom. Not wanting to meet the children, I packed my things and went to my parents. I called Carla to ask when she plans to move out of the house. The kids are asking where you are. What should I tell them? I asked. The truth. Tell them that I'm not their father and introduce them to the real father as soon as possible. I'll leave next week, she replied. 5 days later, Carla and Steve were served at her workplace. The server noted that Carla did not react in any way when she was handed the envelope and looked almost expectant. Steve, on the other hand, got upset and yelled at Carla in the office. A week later, Carla left home with the children, and I watched them leave. I struggled with conflicting emotions. Even though I wanted to keep them with me, I realized that my growing hostility toward their mother would eventually overshadow my love for them. As I watched them leave with tears streaming down their faces, my heart shattered. I felt an irresistible urge to scream, hoping that everything that was happening was just a terrible nightmare. I collapsed on the floor of my house and watched Carla leave me for Steve. 6 months later, our divorce was finalized, and I received my share of the sale of the house. Despite the fact that there was less money, I found solace in the fact that I no longer had to deal with my wife's infidelity. Fortunately, I didn't have to pay child support because Carla earned more than me, but I had to pay child support until the paternity test was done. Soon after, Steve and Carla tied the knot. It took another year before the court finally ruled that Carla and Steve were guilty of paternity fraud and ordered them to pay me the money. In the meantime, they became the legal parents of the children through adoption. It cost me some effort to convince them to undergo the adoption procedure out of court. The less said about it, the better. I used the money I received from the lawsuit to create a college fund for the children, my last gesture toward them. Since the day they left the house, I have not seen the children anymore, although I wanted to, but I decided that it would be better this way. It turned out that Steve hadn't given up on his infidelities. Carla knows about this, and it seems that she has no choice but to accept and move on. I found a job on the south side of Chicago and decided to move there. After a few weeks, I felt lonely and unhappy. One afternoon in Lincoln Park, I came across a little puppy that was injured and in pain. When I approached him, the puppy ran off into the bushes. Curious, I followed him and found 3 small puppies huddled together. I decided to take them to my house. 2 years have passed since that day. I recently found out that Steve was hospitalized after he was brutally attacked by the husband of a woman he was involved with, and I return home every day where wagging tails and loving glances await me. Life couldn't be better. Carla got what she wanted. Her life turned into continuous suffering. Steve did not even try to hide his infidelities from her, but she had nowhere to go.